If we can get the contract from the transit first, it will be easier for us to expand it to the mayoral agencies. I've been talking to people who have experience, that type of experience, in terms of dealing with the transit. And Arthur, who is here, has negotiated a contract for the transit authority. And he did some research, and he wanted to share some of his views with us in terms of how to go about trying to negotiate with the transit first. So give him a chance to present that to you, and give him a big round of applause.
This local has its own bargaining certificate because the guild existed before DC 37 existed. And it has, I think actually at your last meeting, you took a sort of a sense of the house that Local 375 should start utilizing its bargaining certificate. So Claude asked me to look at ways in which we could begin to explore that, as a local. In the Transit Authority, or under the Taylor Law, which happens to govern the employment of those of you who are employed at the Transit Authority, about 1,000 members. They're not under the New York City Collective Bargaining Law, they're under the Taylor Law. Because the Transit Authority is actually not part of New York City. It may have been 30 years ago, but it's not anymore. Earlier last year, 2 of the locals of the Amalgamated Transit Union had a successful bargaining arbitration where they were able to replicate the pattern of Transport Workers Union Local 100, which I happen to do a lot of work for. And that pattern was a pattern of 4, 4, and 3. You guys got the 4 and the 4, but not the 3. The Transit Authority had refused to bargain with all of these unions for the last 3 years. They finally got into bargaining arbitration, and the first 2 ATU locals that went in, the arbitrators said that they had to get the same raise as the other unions that the MTA was dealing with. TWU also went in for its MTA. There's a division called MTA Bus. I'm not sure if any of you work for MTA Bus. The same result came out. They had to get the same contract as the TWU Local 100 got. So this could be a way, without involving the entire city of New York, for this local, if this body thinks it's appropriate, to begin to explore how to use its own bargaining certificate with the Transit Authority to ask to sit down with the authority, have negotiations, whether it's over the first year, because you guys haven't gotten a raise since, what, 2009? Whether it's just over the first year, the one that all the other MTA unions are getting now, or whether it's over something beyond the first year. Various unions in the MTA coalition have begun to negotiate agreements that are not zeros. The MTA, despite all of its crying in public, has come up with more funds, has done better than it initially projected. And so they've been put in a position where they can't sit at the table and bargain for zeros. That is going on at a number of tables around the New York City metropolitan area. There's no reason that your local, with its bargaining certificate, could not explore that. So I've begun looking at this stuff at Claude's request, without any cost to the local. And if this body feels...
If you lock in this 3% with the Transit Authority, does that spill over into the city? Does it put the city in a position some way or the other? Or is it two independent negotiations?
There has always historically been sort of 3 separate patterns in New York State. There's been, or even 4. There's been the city workers, then there's been the Transit Authority and the MTA unions, and then there's been the uniform, which usually follows the city pattern, but sometimes they get a little extra kick. Whether one rubs off on the other remains to be seen. Is there an interrelationship? It's certainly when TWU was bargaining with the Transit Authority, and when they had their arbitration in 2009, they didn't talk about the city's economics. They talked about the MTA's economics. They explored that, and a lot of this stuff is online if people want to look at it. They explored the MTA's finances and what it could afford at that time. But my opinion is it wasn't coincidental that the city pattern, which had already been established, was 4 and 4. And their first 2 years they got 4 and 4, and then they got 3 in the third year. So there's always an interrelationship between them, but one does not dictate the other.
What you hear from Bloomberg's mouth is, oh, the state has 0-0 in furloughs. But what they fail to say is that those very same members already have step pay plans built in. And as per the Triborough Amendment, those continue going on. And the uniformed and the teachers, all of them get a step pay plan. And the public definitely doesn't know, because one of the things I've been pounding here on a regular basis is, as per my agency, I'm disgusted looking at 20+% raises for people making $120,000, $130,000, $150,000 per year. In just the past 3 years, no changes in the work they're doing, just getting, these nice $20+ thousand a year in their salaries. And that's what's going on right now while the mayor is crying. And certainly nobody from DC 37 has ever opened their mouths to ever say it. It's public record, it's quite obvious, and our people have uncovered it, and we had to be forced to use the Freedom of Information to get it.
You're all engineers or people involved in mathematical parts of the world, right? Contract negotiations, and particularly the stuff that leads to binding arbitration, is full math, right? So a step pay plan costs a certain amount of money. Because you're right, the CSEA members, nobody stuck at the same pay rate except maybe the people who are at the top pay. Everybody moved up in the step plan over the period of time that they were getting the zeros. They actually, like 90% of them got raises during that period of time. So step pay plan costs money. So when you're bargaining, that's something that has to be taken into account when you're bargaining. And I would say, the local has to make that decision. The chapter probably is key to that discussion. The chapter officers are particularly important in making those decisions. When you really explore, you cost out every element of what you're bargaining for, and then you figure out what you want to do.
Thank you.
And there are also other DC 37 locals that bargain with the transit authority that don't have their bargaining certificate. There's a transit coalition within DC 37. So we have to weigh all of that when we're not an island unto ourselves, but it could be a way to move forward.